You're off the edge of the map, mate. Here there be monsters.
Considering I've been back towards my love of pirates with different characters, I think it's a good idea for me to still continue talking about this world of nasty villains and swashbuckling heroes. And one such individual that comes to mind that represents both the best qualities of a villain and in fact a hero is none other than Hector Barbossa, the first major player against the likes of Captain Jack Sparrow. He was the former first mate who mutinied upon his quirky captain to seek true piracy for the glory of treasure and all the riches that entail with his dirty lifestyle, which came at the cost of his own life. But one who had a chance to redeem himself along the way, in sort of becoming an anti-hero for the cause of saving piracy with his former rivals turned friends, and then later seeking revenge for something that was taken from him in order to save the ones he loved the most in the final heroic sacrifice that showcased he did have a heart. Now I don't want to keep this as long as my Jack Sparrow video, where I really want to talk about this great personality that kind of represents our true image of what these 18th century pirates were like. A twist of good character storytelling that at the very least I can appreciate films like Parts of Dead Men Tell No Tales for ending that journey quite well, unlike everything else about that film. But beyond our own personal gripes of where the franchise took a free fall and how the films actually performed overall, is the beginning of one of the best pirates in all of cinema. When we take a look at the background of pirates before the films, he was a character made to be the dark trickster counterpart of Jack Sparrow himself, something I'll mention time and time again, where we enter the worlds of piracy during his introduction knowing someone who's rather described as a good man, doing well in service of others as you get to know him, compared to what most people like the Royal Navy thinks who pirates are, who pillage and plunder like Barbossa is. The fact that Jeffrey Rush was the second choice of playing him before he got the part, other than Robert De Niro, who actually didn't want the part because at the time pirate films were considered to be a failure. The genre that hasn't been frankly around in the mainstream other than Disney's franchise to date that we still talk about to this very day. And how Rush described his character as more than a villain, where despite going against all our heroes, he himself also thinks he is a hero who only wants to lift the curse from his crew and sail the seas with treasures untold. Just like Jack when we come to know who they really are and what they value, and the other underlying element discovered in the fifth film. That he allows you to question both the good and bad sides of pirates and the consequences that arise from it, learning to be better at the end of it all. This is not to say that piracy is a good thing and all, that's frankly bad, and they themselves admit that, but there are good sides to each character. So concerning his own backstory, is how he was Jack's first mate who was intent to set out for the cursed treasure of Aztec gold, not believing in Jack's fairy tales as part of the crew, telling him of his plan to share the treasure to reveal the island that would lead to a mutiny against his own captain, marooning him on the island and taking over for the glory of what piracy entails. That he coaxed him into believing that if all must share into the treasure, then we must know where to go, and how his disbelief in ghost stories turned into reality when they all got cursed after they left Jack not being able to properly feel anything anymore. For his character in the beginning was more of a proper pirate compared to his captain. The definition of rascals and scoundrels you pictured in the history books manifested into a proper character, or a proper villain as it might seem. This event became known as the Curse of the Black Pearl, where they became immortal creatures who couldn't take the pleasures in what life had to offer at all, where he had to punish those who regret their decisions in the mutiny, like Bootstrap Bill, who felt real guilty and set his son off with the gold medallion so they couldn't lift the curse at all, strapping him to a cannon sent to the depths of the sea with a fate worse than death, until Davy Jones offered to rescue him and put him in service forever. Where the problem this pirate crew had to face was the knowledge that all the medallions needed to be returned to their chest and blood sacrifice added in order to lift such a curse. This is where the events of the first film play, where 10 years after the mutiny, they get alerted to the location of the medallion after Elizabeth fell into the sea rescued by Sparrow, who knew of that cursed gold that she wore, wondering where she got that, who took that medallion younger when they discovered a young Will, knowing that they would actually brand him as a pirate at the time rather than a regular human, as seen later when he's the blacksmith, and how they treat such individuals like Jack Sparrow, and how they attack Port Royal to see the offspring of Turner, who Elizabeth actually parades as to wear that medallion that they want to capture for their own curse, where his initial appearance gives off a feeling of a no-nonsense captain, reprimanding his crew for hurting his guest of honor. He can easily counteract Elizabeth's fancy words with his own as a pirate to catch her off guard to what he wants rather than what she wants, but knowing he must act careful from her removing the medallion out of their hands. So when she revealed that her last name was quote-unquote Turner, he agreed to the deal of saving Port Royal, taking the medallion, but keeping her because they needed her blood, and is a pirate who follows the code as kind of a guideline rather than the rules as some might do. This then leads to their conversation with Elizabeth in the quarters, offering her food while he eats none of it. One that was clearly saved if the curse was able to be lifted, and showing how he became envious of those who could taste, touch, and smell rather than himself who could not but still live on. Of course, her own suspicions think that this is a trick with poison with the offer of an apple, since Disney is already good at offering poisonous apples, but how he tells the truth that it's not, being useless to kill her at this point for what they really need. And this comes with the backstory of the curse of the Aztec gold that the gods put upon the treasure from those who take after the bloodshed caused by Hernan Cortez long time ago.
The drink would not satisfy. Food turned to ash in our mouths. And all the pleasurable company in the world could not slake our lust. We accursed men, Miss Turner. Compelled by greed we were, but now we are consumed by it.
This speech by him shows a grim reality where he accepted his fate of a horrendous pirate consumed by their own greed, punished for the most gravely of sins for a fate worse than death, where all the riches of the world feel nothing but ash, numb to any desire but pain itself. A villain who knows his own wrongs that would bring him no reward at all after trading his own captain for the gain of his.
For too long I've been parched of thirst and unable to quench it. Too long I've been starving to death and haven't died. I feel nothing. Not the wind on my face, nor the spray of the sea, nor the warmth of a woman's flesh.
This also translates back into the words Geoffrey Rush described Barbossa being that of a hero more likely, because he just wanted his life back, to feel something as any normal human would, had he not been punished like the rest of their crew in their own right. And apparently with Miss Swan, this will finally be repaid, discovering that they are an undead crew who turn into skeletons when the moon shines high above the night sky. A nightmare become true where ghost stories are not lies, but strangely odd facts that exist in the real world, bringing her to the island of Isla de Muerta to return all the pieces for the freedom that mortality brought to them. But when they attempt to complete such a ritual, you see how he feels no different, shooting Pinto to discover that they are still undead, and that Elizabeth Swan lied to them being the daughter of William Turner, where the real son showed up behind to rescue her with Jack Sparrow. Where speaking of Jack Sparrow, he finally got reunited with his frenemy, his former captain who escaped the island he was marooned on, who called for a parley, whom everyone at the time thought he was dead. Of course he tries to get everyone to kill him once and for all, but how Jack is always, and always, one step ahead, knowing whose blood they need. And so, of course, he agrees to such a deal because they still need to live the curse, and how he reminds Barbossa of how his mutiny cursed him instead, where he himself, had he not been thrown away, could have also taken that very treasure. So as Jack Sparrow usually does, he tries to swindle a deal to get his own ship back, but having Barbossa stranded on that same island where he can shout the name of the man he needed while he runs away. But how that is interrupted by the appearance of the Interceptor, where Barbossa still takes the side of piracy rather than Jack's of killing and looting rather than negotiating that lost him the pearl in the first place.
Now you see, Jack, that's exactly the attitude that lost you the pearl. People are easy to search when they're dead.
A viewpoints of two characters who operate on the opposite side of the same coin, where despite the valiant efforts of Elizabeth and Will Turner, the Black Pearl shows her mighty speed, catching up to the most daring of foes in the Interceptor with the crew and whom they needed with Will, who of course then makes a deal with Barbossa with the threat of killing himself to try and torture him forever to stop him from getting his life back, so he can let Elizabeth go free and not harm the entire Interceptor crew. So as we can see, he agrees to such a deal and manages to twist it in his favor, as all good nasty pirates are known for.
Barbossa, you lying bastard! You swore she'd go free!
Don't dare impugn me on her, boy. I agreed she'd go free, but it was you who failed to specify when or where.
Marooning Elizabeth on the island he sent Jack on, and also having Jack back to accompany her this time to punish him yet again for his own manipulations and his previous escape that he should have not done on sea turtles. And returning to Isla de Muerta, the crew were not willing to make any big mistakes this time, wanting to kill him and spill all of his blood instead. But somehow, yet again, we see later, Jack Sparrow makes his grand return after Elizabeth called for the Royal Navy to rescue them, sending them to their location so they can find the pirates and possibly get the mandated wedding between Commodore Norrington and Elizabeth that they were supposed to have at the very beginning.
It's not possible.
not probable.
This causes Barbossa to relent, listening to Jack's negotiations of getting the ship back once again out of the threat of the Dauntless crew coming to take them for their crimes, with a big new ship outside to elevate Barbossa with a fleet of ships after their curse was complete, restoring Captain Jack under Commodore Barbossa's command. Something that we will revisit quite later when it does come true when he gets his own fleet of ships and become the legendary pirate of the seas. It reveals the shortcomings of Barbossa as a character, who's enticed by this deal as a pirate should be when they want the freedom to rule the seas as anyone else desires. That this is the ultimate goal for someone like himself who chooses this lifestyle, not knowing what honestly dishonest characters like Jack are capable of even doing. That even though he worked beside him, knowing his own wild side, he could never predict or anticipate what his former captain's next move might be, even with his own tricks up his sleeve to command the crew to walk the ocean floor rather than taking boats for a surprise attack. It's a great mistake on his part because he knew damn well before not to trust Jack, but did so out of his own ego, like all pirates have, for the status life should be given to them after defeating the ultimate battle with the curse of Aztec gold put upon them as punishment after the mutiny of Jack. Because after Jack's honest speech about being dishonest, he frees Will and goes straight to battle with Hector himself for as long as possible. One where we know he physically has the upper hand of being undead and all, and he admits himself, but how he's constantly taken off guard in this entire sequence for what has transpired in this great big lie, demonstrated by how he knows he's dead, dropping his weapon saying he can't be beat, or stabbing him is a waste of time, until he finally sees that this trick was done with the coin earlier that allowed Jack Sparrow to continue fight as a fellow member of the undead until Will and Jack himself were ready to return on their own terms with such a fight. It demonstrates what we knew since the very beginning with his mutiny, that villains like Barbossa are just too arrogant to understand anything that goes around them. Until the very last second. So with Elizabeth's return, they finally take the last steps where Jack shoots the still undead Barbossa, not believing it would affect him, until he reveals that he finished the last piece of the puzzle, with Will immediately returning life to their bodies as blood appeared from his chest, but then quickly taking that life away, with the crew on the ship also realizing their short-lived freedom.
I feel cold.
These words carry on a deeper meaning for his own character, gaining the thing he yearned for since the very beginning of this film, but also taking away from that at the very same second, at the same time as Jack's revenge was being fulfilled. A hint of joy with a pile of sadness washing over as a completion of his punishment for deeds done in the past. A debt that was finally completed on his end of the treasure for an understandable yet nasty pirate of himself. It completed a journey that gave us a look into the darker ends of what a pirate's life could entail on the side of what you lose after what you can gain, and describing someone who really isn't inherently evil, but also never good at all, which is why we all fell in love with him as a character and couldn't bear to let him go, as it was an element that felt missing later in the sequel until Jack met his own fate with Davy Jones' locker, sacrificing himself until they needed him back, with Tia Dalma resurrecting from the dead to help them all out. Help that was needed out of the cost of the threat of Lord Cutler Beckett, who desired to end all of piracy and perform his greedy corporate duties over the seas, with Hector returning as one of the 9 pirate lords needed to convene the Brethren Court and possibly release Calypso. This return is somewhat shocking, but also very pleasant as it allowed us to explore more of Barbossa rather than him just being a one-shot villain of a singular film, making him another human character that had much more inside, as we learned, with the goal of finding freedom from a curse he did not want, thus becoming more of an anti-hero in this regard of the next film. More specifically, he acted more as a mediator between parties, making amends between some of his enemies like Jack, then getting them all to fight for piracy. Yet of course, not without them still being the besties who fight over everything of who is captain and who is not, with Will temporarily resolving matters to take over while having them both have a heart-to-heart conversation about their own mortality and how things won't last forever, as I have shown before talking about Jack.
You know, the problem with being the last of anything, by and by there'll be none left at all. There's never a guarantee of coming back. But passing on, that's dead certain.
It's an important conversation to realize their own place in the world that desires more change, and the realization that their own place in it might be soon gone, staying the same, but having less in the world as a result. Both actually completely understand each other even though they've been at odds at all times, since they are pirates who long to live for the sea. This film lets us dive more into how he took the Jack Sparrow route of negotiation, showing he's more open to actually seeing both parties to get what they want when Sao Fang made deals with Beckett, as that was the winning side, until he convinces that Calypso's is on theirs, getting Elizabeth on board as a trade-off. Yet, despite working together with the crew, he still yearns for his own agenda to complete the ends, meeting with Calypso herself, knowing what to do to bring him back, but not without bringing his fears of what she can do to turn his flesh back into bone once more. This gives us the contemplation of mortality still on his plate for his own character that meets the world's end and the supposed end of their life that they deserve. That he's yearning for freedom, but he still does not have that point quite yet. This is where we bring up the role he brings to the film, that he proposes that the court must release Calypso to gain advantage and make it harder for the East India Company to rule over the seas, despite what the pirates did in the very beginning with Davy Jones, so that they may have a chance even though they imprisoned her in a human body at Jones's own request. But how he cannot, as Sparrow made Elizabeth Pirate King, so that they may fight against them, while revealing they were outnumbered and call for a parley in exchange for a deal, as Will did so himself earlier, revealing that Jack gave clues away to where they were, and how Barbossa angrily took his piece of 8 as he could not determine his own fate up until this very point to free Calypso.
Apologies, Your Majesty. Too long my fate has not been in my own hands. No longer.
A lot of his character is about the freedom of what a pirate's life entails, a plan that ultimately didn't feel like working after she returned to the sea, and how he felt defeated soon after, knowing he didn't want to die again for a revenge that would ultimately fail in an armada of ships until she summoned the courage of the crew to fight with Calypso's maelstrom in view that also gave him courage in turn when they called him forth back to the helm of the Black Pearl, to gladly accept as the pirate he was meant to be.
Captain Barbossa! We need you at the helm!
Aye, that be true.
At times you tossle back and forth of what this character's own true agenda is, until you realize it in this very scene that he yearns to be that pirate who has such fun with treasures untold into battle.
Raise up yours, you cat-headed dickheads! Die is the day worth living for!
So as the ship's captain, he rallied the crew together to fight the Dutchmen and battle fish demons and company guards while being asked to wed both Turner and Swan finally, which he does so in the best way possible that no other wedding could ever do or have beaten it at all in life itself.
Dearly beloved, we be gathered here today. Today the kisses of the mask, you foxy cur!
It's one of the best quotes in the film, to be honest, that proves Barbossa's worthy loyal heart to his friends, who were at once his enemies as a villain, but now a valiant hero who fights helping what they needed to be done as they complete the battle and face off Daggett for the final time, with Will now at the helm of Davy Jones's ship. It's an end to a journey where they all earn their freedom back to live as pirates, now congratulating Mrs. Turner as she parts way with all the crew for the last time, and not without ending things by proving he still is that pirate by leaving Jack behind once again, where the crew doesn't quite agree with that as they all taken a fondness for them, but how as their captain he tries to ease their fears with the deal to find the Fountain of Youth with Sao Feng's charts, getting back on track to where they once were at the beginning. That still reminds us that they all are treasure-seeking pirates who yearn for eternal life across the 7 seas. But not once again without Jack having the last laugh, cutting the most important map that they needed and leaving them behind to take off for other treasures in between. And over time, this sadly leads them getting caught by Blackbeard himself, leaving Barbossa scarred with a missing leg, untangled from the mess, losing the pearl in the process, but letting him to live on to exact his revenge with on stranger tides when they try to find the Fountain of Youth. This is where he was revealed to become a privateer in His Majesty's presence, a royal pardon laid upon him to lead a crew back to the fountain that he too had been searching for a long time when he reunited with Jack Sparrow, questioning why he wasn't chained as he knew his own nasty tricks, and also playing off this part so that they cannot suspect he is after his own agenda. It's an awkward twist revealing how a pirate like him would stoop so low when we view things on the pirate side of life to become such a servant of society, but how it's all justified in an understandable manner if you know who Barbossa is as a pirate and what he wants to do after what Blackbeard took from them. So when Jack escapes, he takes the task put upon him to find the fountain before the Spanish do with the crew, and Gibbs, who destroyed the map upon him to help force his help from being hanged, where despite being in service of the crown, He still tends to show his piracy attitude whenever he goes to his advantage with the resources that they have. A fleet that would carry on to his eventual destination with Blackbeard himself, as they would find out soon enough. But for the time being, his qualities as a pirate allows him to rally the crew together more so than any other Royal Navy officer could, with the threat of villainous mermaids and other awkward creatures that could await them. Something other characters like Commodore Norrington probably could never muster enough courage to even speak about to face, considering Lieutenant Grove stands beside Barbossa this time after previously serving Beckett also. In such portions, he still continues his image as an anti-hero, since Gibbs is still being threatened with death at every single step of the film, and people like Groves do feel uneasy about the way things might be handled by Hector as captain, who threatens him at times when the ship gets destroyed by mermaids that they eventually cannot stop. That the point of this journey is to continue on for his own revenge rather than, what they all want. And how at times, he still demonstrates his own crazy nature that continues the trend of being the darker half of Jack that Gore Verbinski created in the beginning, doing the most weirdest things in the most simplest of circumstances with the small toad he added to his own jar.
What'd be wrong with an older man having a hobby?
We say this because it's something we realize is used later for his own blade to become poison, knowing who else might be in search for the fountain, with Jack and Blackbeard on the other side of the island, not very far away when they reach the Santiago to find the chalices. So when he says something like this while passing it off as an odd hobby that the crew becomes bewildered at, we understand Barbossa's own genius that mirrors Jack what he did himself all those years ago at Isla de Muerta, especially now at the fact that they both meet for the same chalices while the ship rocks back and forth. Two characters that have spent years searching for the fountain themselves as proposed by the end of the last movie, but had yet to find it. And this is one of the best qualities that you can actually like about pirates, despite what the films might be themselves, that they understand the characters of Barbossa and Jack Sparrow for the most part until the very end, and how they both see that the Spanish had arrived first to claim the chalices with the map, providing the clue to their own camp to make haste, where the two characters had to sneak up to the camp that reminds us what the toads were used for.
Your sword smells funny. Poison from the innards of poisonous toads. Just a scratch or a dead man in minutes.
That we are reminded right here that they are poisoned so that whoever gets stabbed is guaranteed the painful death they deserve, leading to the conversation of his own backstory after they both get captured by the Spanish. It's from here where we discover what happened to the Pearl since Jack left, and was clever enough to see through a pirate like himself who wanted revenge against Blackbeard. A speech that makes the most of this movie for me, that is still as decent, describing a true pirate who loves the Pearl that was very important to him as much as Jack's. The story of Blackbeard making the ship turn against him, taking away the thing that he wanted since the very beginning of the first film since we saw him, being that of freedom, where he lost his leg trying to get free, surviving, and only using his services as a way to get back at Edward Teach.
I am the master of my ship, not Blackbeard. I am the master of my fate, not Blackbeard.
And you can't argue with how fantastic of a pirate he is when he yearns for having his left arm fight Blackbeard, while his right arm is used to strike the killing blow.
I need my good arm to drive my poisoned blade through his heart.
And here is where we really understand that both characters are really best friends in only a way pirates could even be, who constantly backstab each other, where Jack agrees to help give him a chance by escaping and helping lead them behind to follow where Blackbeard and the rest of the crew are. He then soon reveals himself to Blackbeard's crew, where Angelica accuses Jack of leading them here, while Blackbeard himself feels as if his own damning prophecy of a one-legged man come to kill him had become a reality to face him, which he agrees to go down with a fight between the Royal Navy and his own dastardly crew. This is where we see in the scene within the fight how he uses his disadvantages to his own advantage with his peg leg, similar again like Jack did with the medallion to win, but how the Spanish followed swoon right behind them as well to do what they wanted to do by destroying the fountain. And by doing this, he uses this distraction as the advantage to his right arm, driving the poisonous blade into the dark heart as service of his beloved ship, the Black Pearl.
For the Pearl.
Where with that, his victory is gained at the cost of Angelica trying to save him, but also getting cut by the venom blade that he had used to face Blackbeard. So with this eventual death, he claimed the rest of Blackbeard's crew as his own by taking his sword and his own ship after the Royal Navy was wiped out completely, granting him the revenge he needed to be complete, with the Queen Anne's revenge itself to symbolize this very victory. A perfect ending for someone who now become the hero of this entire journey, defeating the villain known as Blackbeard forever, free to roam the seas with a new ship and crew straight toward Tortuga and onward to a next film. And again, like I said at the beginning, this is the only thing I could really praise about the last movie release being Dead Men Tell No Tales, as I refused to include that making the video about Jack Sparrow because they made him into a drunken idiot with no qualities to who he actually was. But at the very least, can appreciate how they managed to get Barbossa to a level he always wanted since Jack uttered the words of his own fleet in the first film, having so himself before Salazar destroys ships in search of Sparrow. The one where Karina is also found to be his own daughter, left with a life that wasn't of his own piracy, but to be better off for it. It shows a lot of good to his own character despite what he had done in the past that proved his own right of becoming a hero himself. With his name also known and feared across the Caribbean by this point, you can truly say that he achieved his happy ending, at the cost of whomever it was that thought it was a great idea to make Jack a total idiot. So everything you see in this new appearance is that of a man who achieved his own story with a golden peg leg and golden rooms and golden ships and everything a successful pirate would even look like. More so than his time as captain of the Black Pearl, since he was cursed. So when his ships get sunk one by Salazar, he consulted the witch he saved long ago from hanging so that his enemies could have been cursed in his wake, where she reveals a task that is hard for him to swallow since they needed Sparrow to take revenge while he searches for the trident. And the only way to avoid such a fate right now, since the trident could not be found, was to actually be on dry land, which he refused himself since his love is of the sea, with its treasure being who he was as a pirate.
Ask yourself this, Captain. Is this a treasure worth dying for?
I'm a pirate. Always will be.
Again in this film, as you will find out, his true role is more of the main hero of this film, protecting the actions of the main characters the further you go, confronting Salazar himself to spare his life by making a deal to find the legendary captain who destroyed the undead ghost a long time ago. It was a fearsome deal that he could have just killed them at any moment, but spared due to their mortal bonds being able to land while he could not, just like past foes like Davy Jones, and how he actually wants to find the trident himself to kill Salazar and reclaim what was his treasure over the seven seas. Yes, the easiest route for him in this entire film would just be to give Jack Sparrow up himself, especially in his own dreadful state, where he could go back free to do whatever he wanted to do, but he really does care about Jack in his own way, despite his own threats. That there's more than meets the eye to his own character that values good rather than evil. So using Blackbeard's own sword that imprisoned the Pearl a long time ago, he set it free once again back to its original state, leading to their ultimate destination of the trident, and reunited with Jack the Monkey. One where he finally discovers his long-lost daughter Karina, who had been running with Will Turner's own son and Jack. This discovery came through the diary he once possessed of Galileo, that he gave to her with the ruby, thinking she would form a better life of it, not knowing she would actually make a life out of that own book. A truth that points to the lost treasure that he was meant to find being his actual daughter, and one where he talks to Jack about his own past with its own flame who passed long ago by the name of Margaret Smith. It reveals more to his character that actually could love another person that we didn't know of, that makes him more vulnerable to be an actual good person. One where he really admits that he is a blackguard thief who deserves no honor being a pirate who society deems as the true evil, where he gave her up for orphanage as he thought it would be better for her rather than living with him for a father.
I summoned as much honor as a worthless blackguard ever could. I placed the infant in an orphanage, never to see her again. I thought the ruby might afford her some ease in life, but I never imagined she'd take those scribblings and make a life of her own. Life that's led her back to me.
It's a deep reflection of his own character overall, one that we charted a journey we never thought possible after gaining and losing something at the same time, with his first trip to the locker, and then revived to having a fresh start at that pirate life. Now faced with the legacy he has to leave as Salazar breathes down their own neck, doing battle for the final time before they find the place where the trident could be found, where he remained on the surface while Karina and Jack went to the bottom they needed to get to the trident, where he got back to the ship to help his friends from above and the incoming Salazar, who tried to use that magic against them. And with the Pearl on edge, his men lowered their anchor, where he beckoned his friends to climb on up again, before the walls of the water could close on them as the undead ghost became human once again, as all curses were finally defeated. But as he was still thirsty for revenge, Salazar also managed to climb up, trying to get his last attempt to get Jack once and for all, where the crew struggled to lift him back up. And before she was able to fall straight down and slipping, Barbossa caught her in time, revealing a tattoo that resembled the same thing that Galileo drew in his book, finally revealing that Barbossa was her father.
Who am I to you?
treasure.
Such words just ring very true to the character of Barbossa for who he was and what he was searching for in his whole life, and compared to the similar words Jack Sparrow spoke long ago in his own franchise, that not all treasure was silver and gold.
Not all treasure is silver and gold, mate.
But people whom you love dearly, caring for the mistakes of your past, to go for a brighter future. Where this statement was his own acceptance of his death for payment of all of his own sins, starting with the introduction as a villain up to his moment as king of the seas for a time. Where if he could not live a good life, then he, like Sparrow instead, could end it off as a good man that was once and always would be a pirate, saving the ones he truly loves with family and friends, finally stabbing Salazar with Jack's sword, and accepting his fate beneath the waves of his beloved sea. This second death is well deserved and earned for his feelings of selflessness that redeems all of what he'd done in his past lives, and securing that of the next when everyone comes together to mourn his own passing, dedicated to the pirate's life of his fellow brother Jack, who really was the other side of the same coin of a pirate, and his daughter, Karina, who now fully accepts who she is as a Barbossa.
My name is Barbossa.
A daughter of the pirate lord of the Caspian Sea, a legend that would carry on for generations despite his noble misdeeds in life that were celebrated in the halls of history to come.
Pirate's life, Hector.
In the end, his adventure taught us that not all villains remained as villains, where they potentially can, or even was from the very start, heroes in their own right who fight for what they love the most, that they are good rather than evil. It is a tale of monsters who are really men, cursed by definitions of what society slaps on as pirates, while also admitting to such a crime, but all for the life that is fun and free as that can be. With those who really do care about their fellow men, if you think about Sparrow and Barbossa within the broader context of these entire stories. Whatever the future might hold for this franchise, I think it's safe to say that his story is truly all done, with more that can be shown in the guiding light moving pirates forward to do something great with their own lives, and other generations to remind them of who they are and what they can be. In a good way, of course. And what can I say except it was truly a pirate's life. Thank you, Hector.